So hi everyone, and welcome to the next guest expert call with the Solve Network. My name is Shane, and I'm the host of these calls along with my partner Benjamin. We like to create connections between both experts in different areas of specialty or industry, and not only potential clients, but people who are looking for not only connection, but answers. And this gives us an opportunity to have someone present a specialty business or a skill set, but also have a discussion and a Q&A one-on-one with the expert. So if you're interested in joining us on a call so that you can listen in or get your questions answered, please go to thesolvenetwork.com. You can sign up for a mailing list and you'll find out who the next speaker is or the upcoming speakers, because we are booked through the end of the year. And if you're someone who's interested in coming on and presenting, you can also contact us. It's a great place to practice your signature speech. It's a great way to connect with people who might become clients. And it's also a great way to just get your message out, as we do broadcast both the audio and video of these calls afterwards. So today I'm really excited to bring on our guest expert, who is Holly Copeland. She is a certified human potential coach, which is a background that we share. But she has quite a different specialty and perspective than I do, even though we have similar training background. She has a company called HeartMind Alchemy, which unites ancient wisdom with modern science. And I'm really excited to have her talk about how she rewired her brain with meditation. And that's going to be her presentation tonight. So Holly, welcome, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Shane. Really appreciate being here, being asked to be on, and excited to share with everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Like Shane said, I am a human potential coach, and I also am a scientist. My background is in ecology and geography, and I had a 20-year career with the Nature Conservancy and worked for the University of Wyoming as a migration scientist. And a few years ago, I had kind of a big, come to Jesus moment in my life, I guess, and things started to fall apart. And I, from that falling apart, I really retooled with meditation and really changed my life entirely. And so what I'd like to share tonight is that story and what I have come to, as I look back on what happened and is still happening and evolving, have kind of articulated 7 things that I think were really key to that whole process. And so I'm going to share those with you all tonight, and welcome questions on that. So, as I said, I had this kind of watershed moment, and really it was a culmination of a few things, but in short, I suffered from mold illness. I actually, it turned out that the bed that I was sleeping on had mold hidden inside it I couldn't see, and it made me really sick. And I had no idea for over 6 months why I was so sick. And so that was happening. And then the job that I was at, I worked for the Nature Conservancy, and it was a wonderful job, but I'd been there for 20 years and I was really just burnt out. I'd been working so hard and didn't know how to sense that there was something else I really wanted to do, but also just needed to stop the burnout and figure out how to put the brakes on and live life differently. And so I quit that job and took a new job with the University of Wyoming. And when I did that, I actually realized that I didn't actually believe that being a scientist was really like the thing I wanted to write down as my career. And I sensed that there was something else. And I did a lot of soul searching to figure out what that was. And it turned out that that was coaching. So that's what led me here. And on that path, I really learned, I realized in that whole journey that while I had spent my whole life exercising and taking care of myself with food, and I'd always paid attention to those things, the one thing that I really hadn't paid attention to was my mind. And my mind was you know, like I think a lot of people, is kind of rife with monkey mind and not settled and thinking a lot about the past or the future. And I realized that that was inherently kind of making me miserable. And I didn't know how to shift it, but I kind of became determined to shift it. And I essentially took my science-based biohacky disposition that I already had and just poured it into that. Like hacking my brain was essentially what I decided I needed to do. And the first book that really was a watershed that changed my life was a book called The Open Focus Brain. And I learned about the alpha brain. I'm going to talk more about that. But as I read more and more and learned about you know, meditation and really more about meditation and what it was about, I just started doing all these things, and it worked so phenomenally well that I essentially rewired my brain and became what I feels to me today like a fundamentally different and much happier person. And so what I really became guided to do in my coaching work was to help other people do that. That if it worked so well for me, and then I would really like to spend my life helping other people sort of step out of the crazy monkey mind rat race and learn how to change your life through changing your mind. And no one can do it for you. So that's the thing about, just like exercise or eating, at the end of the day, we have to make these choices ourselves. We have to choose how to shift our perspective. And although I had read about that my whole life, I'd been a seeker and somebody who'd read about being in the present moment and meditating, and I tried these things. I had never been actually able to do it. Never actually been able to learn how to live in the present moment. And that's what I learned over the last year and a half, and that's what I want to share. So, among other few things. So I wrote this article in Medium. You can go see it. We can put a link to it, and described that whole story in this article. And I'm in the middle of actually writing a second follow-up article that hopefully will be out in a week or two, where I really sat down and identified 7 keys that were the things to me that were the biggest game changers in how I shifted my brain. And so I'm going to walk through those. And, you know, as you can see, it's like the first one is just about becoming a warrior of your own brain and neuroplasticity and what that means. Learning to meditate and understanding why that's such a powerful game-changing technique. Escaping the not enough trap, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that actually is, but it's changing your thoughts and your perceptions about who we really are in our own mind. About guarding your mental inputs, being the gatekeeper to what comes in. And then some basic ones that, you know, I'd done for a long time, and I think they're still fundamentally important, but, you know, what you eat, movement and light and sleep are all fundamentally important, but I think they're down the list of these other top 4. But I think they belong on the list, so I think it's important to highlight them. So the first one is really understanding that, you know, you have this magical changeable brain inside you. And through the gift of neuroplasticity, you have the power to change your brain. And I'm realizing, Shane, I wanted to show this video, but I'm not sure that the sound will work. It's only like 3 minutes, but I would have to share my sound. So maybe I will not do that because I'm not sure. Might be a little hard to do.
You can always give me the link and I'll put it in the notes and send it out.
Okay. So the key idea here that this link, that this video shows, is that your brain works like, I think this is a beautiful analogy, works like a highway. If we think about, you know, how connections in your brain work, you have these interstate highways running from your behaviors. So things that you do, your brain learns and how to do these things well, and it creates these really strong connections like highways between things. And if you want to create a new habit, you need to start doing those things so that your brain will start creating those, cementing those, building those new highways or pathways. So, you know, you may have a weak 2-track road between something that you hardly ever do, like meditate, but you can change your brain by start doing that thing, and your brain, through the beauty of neuroplasticity, will then start to pay self-reinforcing mechanism that can work in your favor once you understand that you just need to start doing those behaviors, and your brain will help you by building those highways, those strong connections to the things, the behaviors you want to keep doing. So I think keeping that in mind and knowing that even though meditation, for example, may seem difficult in the beginning, or some behavior we want to do, if we keep in mind that we're just building those, reinforcing those 2-track roads and turning them into highways, that can keep the motivation going, knowing that your brain is so plastic and has the ability to change. And this is really coined in that wonderful kind of axiom, modern axiom of neuroscience, which is cells that wire together, fire together. So they will, once they're wired together, will start firing together, and you will begin to create a whole new brain. You're rewiring your brain, literally. Something else that was really fundamental to my change was reading and understanding about brainwaves and brainwave states. So this book, like I said, this Open Focus Brain book that I first read, and then other ones such as Joe Dispenza's book, Superhuman, and Anna Wise's book, Awakened Brain, talks about how our brains have different brainwave patterns that are firing. And so when we're, you know, when we're having a very busy, active brain, for example, we use a lot of beta brainwaves. And what we would actually prefer to have is to shift into a more relaxed, alert state and have lots of alpha brainwaves, for example, which are these slower than beta brainwaves. Or in meditation, we want to start to promote the intuitive, creative, deeper, slower brainwaves like theta. Many people have heard of delta, which are your sleep waves. So having, you know, slower sleep waves can also be very beneficial. And then actually, you have some high, very fast brainwaves called gamma that are actually associated with flow states and gratitude and awakened brain. So just the understanding that your brain has these different brainwave patterns, and through meditation and other gratitude practices, we can start to promote more alert, relaxed brainwaves and shift out of constant beta brainwave thinking that is associated with the monkey mind, for example. And so I liken this to, you know, kind of resist your inner cave being, you know, so, you know, we might have evolved to be on the savannah, you know, in this, you know, we have this system that's evolved to react to a threat like a lion, you know, on the savannah. But the problem is now is that we don't live in that environment anymore. And so something like a traffic jam or a long line at the grocery store is activating those same systems in our body that would have been designed to act to, say, a lion on the savannah. So what we need to do is shift our brain out of this pattern of beta brainwave thinking all chronically in that state all the time, and learn how to rest in a more alpha and relaxed state to promote a calm, relaxed system. And this is really what we're really doing, is turning on the parasympathetic nervous system and activating the vagus nerve. So that's our, you know, the parasympathetic nervous system is our rest and digestive system. And what we don't want to be is in a heightened sympathetic nervous system all the time. So understanding this and using these principles to help understand your biology, and understand that when you meditate and do other practices, you're turning on these systems that are inherently there. We're just not used to or conscious of, oh, I could actually stop and breathe now and shift into this other state. Also, heart coherence is, I think, a really important concept, and some people here may have heard about heart rate variability. And I think one of the really key aspects of understanding about heart coherence is just this big aha that I know I had when I first kind of started to understand what was so important about heart coherence, was that the heart actually sends more signals to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. And I think a lot of us, myself included, before I got into all this, kind of thought that my brain was the thing that was sending the conductor, sending all this information to the rest of my body, but actually your brain is receiving signals from the rest of your body. So when we slow down, for example, and breathe consciously through our heart, we are activating, we're sending the signal to the brain to calm down. So understanding that and really understanding what that means is fundamental to starting to take charge of your own biological system. Also knowing that the heart produces 5,000 times stronger of an electromagnetic signal than your brain does. So the power of heart coherence and coherent breathing is really phenomenal. And so I, for example, I got a heart math device and started to learn how to create heart coherent breathing, which is having this variation in your heartbeat in a more, like on the right-hand side, in this more coherent pattern rather than an incoherent pattern as shown on the left. And I wrote a lot about this and some of the science behind this in an article I wrote for Medium, so you could link to that, Shane, called The Heart of Our Mind. And just really talked about the importance of these heart-brain connections to rewire our brains for calm and clarity. Shane, would you sit with me for just a minute? I want to guide folks in just a kind of simple 4 to 8 coherent breathing experience. And I have one other of these kind of personal experiences.
Yeah, of course.
All right, great. So just close your eyes. And we're just going to we're going to breathe in for 4. And then a long, slow out for 8. I want you to breathe in feelings of compassion and breathe out in gratitude and breathe out love. So this can be breathing in and feelings for family members, pets, something that just brings you great joy. But when we combine these slower breathing, like a 4-8 breathing pattern, with feelings of love and compassion, we start to increase our heart coherence. So I just want to do this to get people a feeling for what this feels like. 2, 3, 4, out for 8. In for 4. Out for 8. In for 4. Out for 8. Great. So that just gives you a little bit of a flavor for what that was like. And Shane, I don't know if you want to give me any input or feedback into your experience.
Yeah, sure. I do use the heart math, and it is really amazing how impactful it can be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think breathing exercises like this are great because if you don't have one of those devices, you can still get a lot out of it. And one of the things that's new for me is attaching the intention of the inhale and then a different intention with the exhale.
Yeah.
And so I do a lot of different types of structured breathing, but that was a nice addition because I could, the first round or two, I was very conscious of like, oh, I'm choosing to like assign something to this inhalation or exhalation, but then I kind of got into it, and then it was like going on its own. And that was
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. So, really key in the heart math and the heart coherence literature is this tying an emotion to and a felt experience to the breathing practice as really supercharging your coherence. So that's great. Thank you for your input. That's perfect. And so the first one was this kind of sense of neuroplasticity and changing that through, heart coherence and other measures. So then I kind of really, one of the first things that I learned that really struck me was all the literature about actually how meditation can literally change your brain, increasing density and activity in major areas of the brain. And I'll give you an example of this. For example, this famous study by Sarah Lazar, who is at Harvard, found differences in brain volume after just 8 weeks of 5 different regions of the brain in 2 groups. So this was, these were non-meditators who started meditating. It was 20 to 30 minutes a day. And she measured 5 different changes in 5 different regions of the brain just from that 20 to 30 minutes a day. It really showed incredible, scientifically backed studies showing the incredible power of even just 20 or 30 minutes a day of meditation. And then other studies have found, and I'm not going to go into, this isn't a research paper, so I'm not going to go into all the science behind this, but I have links to these in the paper, in that Medium article I wrote. For example, the emotional brain stress center, the amygdala, through meditation gets smaller. The neocortex, the sort of whole top center of your brain, gets thicker and denser. So you're actually getting better brain matter. Thicker and denser hippocampus. This is your learning and memory center through meditation. Strengthened prefrontal cortex. So that's your conductor. If we think of your brain being an orchestra, that's your conductor. And it has a lot to do with emotional regulation, and meditation strengthens that. And then lastly, this is really important. So the cingulate cortex in the back of your brain, where it's often called the default mode network, is the center of your brain for mind wandering and self-referential thinking. And so this is really the seat of your monkey mind, if you like that. And you actually start to deactivate that center when you learn to meditate, which to me, that was actually one of the first things that I started to notice when I really was doing a lot of regular meditation, was all those annoying monkey mind thoughts. I was just having less of them. I just wasn't thinking about the past, not because I was trying, not because I was doing anything other than meditating. They just started happening less. It was really phenomenal. And so reinforcing, like, oh, this is really helping, So, and I admittedly had a very busy, understand that I came from, being a very analytical, science-driven person with constant thinking all the time, and was really able to shut that off and then just decide to think, essentially. So thoughts don't just come up like randomly. It was huge for me, this experience of deactivating the default mode network. And so a lot of, I think it's important to just talk a little bit about what meditation is. So meditation to me, I mean, we can get down a big rabbit hole on that, full into the path to awakening and enlightenment, which I very much am on that path myself. But I don't think, I think that don't have, that's not important to them to get started, and really understanding that just building stable attention or concentration, and then this ability to be mindfully aware in the present moment are kind of two of the key goals, especially in the beginning. And I really highly recommend a book called Raising Our Vibration. This was a group that I ended up meeting through a Facebook connection last April. And they have a course, a 10-week meditation course. There's actually one that starts in 2 weeks. I highly recommend it. So we can put some link to that, but it's raisingourvibration.net. So if you want some support to get started in meditation regularly, I really recommend this course and the book that goes with it. And the teachers, Kevin Scheninger and Stephen Altair, are fabulous teachers who have enormous background in meditation. I think combined 90 years of experience in meditation. So they're really knowledgeable. Some more about kind of what meditation can do. So one of the things that it really starts to do, when I talked about brain waves, is shifting into a more alpha brainwave state, or a more relaxed, open state. And some, like I said, incredible science has been done on this. But for example, they have found improvement in mood, and reduction in tension and anxiety, and clearer thinking, memory, and heightened creativity. And you can see, like, those are the result of having a smaller amygdala, for example, or having a strengthened prefrontal cortex. Also, you are activating some key hormones in your body, like serotonin and melatonin, that regulate, really important physiological systems in your body that relate to mood and calmness. DMT is actually the active molecule in ayahuasca, and interestingly enough, through meditation, you actually release natural small amounts of that hormone through meditation. So one of the things that I really, as a scientist, started to do was to use the Muse headset to track my own brainwaves, because I wanted to, well, at first I just was using it as a tool for meditation. And so I did some neurofeedback work, and I got this Muse device, and there's an app that you can put it on and meditate and get these graphs. So what you're looking at here is a kind of typical, one of my typical graphs from the temporal region behind my head. So you can see here in blue are the alpha brain waves, here are the theta brain waves, delta and beta in green, and gamma in orange. And so what I started to do was track my meditations and see how I was changing my brain during the meditation. And I started to notice some really interesting things. One was that the brainwaves started to get more coherent, which is a sign of a brain that is functioning better, that the brainwaves are more coherent. This is another one. This is from the frontal lobes, and you can see the pretty high coherence here, which it did not look like that in the beginning, I promise you. And then this decreased activity. So this is my prefrontal cortex kind of, calming down and going from this high thinking brain to a more relaxed brain with less activity. And then I did something that was pretty interesting. I used my science background to use a program called R to take all this data that I'd been collecting, because I did all these meditations and I was collecting data, and I wrote a program just to track all these different brainwaves over time to see. What I really wanted to know was I getting more theta, which is one of the key brainwaves you want in meditation, and alpha? Was I getting more of that in my meditations? And indeed I did. Over 6 month time, I saw that my overall levels of theta and alpha increased dramatically. I think this decrease in delta is actually a function of quieting my mind, settling down my body, because delta is very sensitive to movement. And I won't go into beta and gamma. They're a little more complex. So I don't really want to spend some time on that, but suffice it to say, to me, it was really interesting and very rewarding to see that through these practices, I was able to increase alpha and theta, for example, in my meditations. So direct evidence. I felt like my brain was changing, and I had evidence that my brain was changing. And so next, I just, want to talk a little bit about this escaping the not enough trap or ending the suffering. And, I said viewpoint is really important. And what I realized was that I spent a lot of my life I'm a very compassionate person, and I care very much about the planet and people, as a lot of people do. And it was very painful to see all the environmental and destruction and human suffering on the planet. And that, I carried that with me in my life. And that weight of that was making me miserable, I guess. And what I realized was that that was a bottomless hole, that if I constantly took that into myself and took that pain, I myself would always be miserable. And this was really kind of where I started to go down the Buddhist path. I didn't necessarily, didn't know that's where I was going, but it turns out that the ideas that I was coming to and the conclusions I was coming to in my own self were very aligned with a lot of Buddhist notions about how we actually end suffering as humans in ourselves. And for me, it was really about understanding that there would never be enough time or resources or money to fix all the things that I wanted fixed. And so if I took that sort of logic conclusion, what it really meant was, well, okay, so I have a choice. Am I going to be myself miserable because I know that there will always be this endless suffering in the world? Or would it be more helpful if I myself became whole and complete, and then I, from that space of being okay, could then help others? That I would be more useful to the world if I was a light inside. I was more of a use to the world that way. And that radical shift in perspective of understanding that I needed to be okay, I needed to find a way within myself to be okay amidst the suffering of the world and the planet that I cared so much about, was a radical shift in viewpoint for me. That I didn't have to embody the suffering that I saw outside, that I didn't actually need to do that. That wasn't, I think there's a sense that we need to take that on to show that we're a compassionate person. We need to, there's sort of a self-righteousness, like, oh, I feel so much, to show that I care and feel, I have to be, this unending sort of suffering within myself. And I think that's a not helpful view. And because it ends up, we just become a puddle, right? If we're a useless puddle of tears because of all the pain we see in the world, how's that going to help anybody? So I shifted that around, and really what I say is I became the tree, not the leaf. Rather than being a leaf blown around by the winds of all the suffering that I saw in the world, that I would become the tree, the strength, so that I could help other people. And another aspect to this that was really fundamental for me was this really unfusing of thoughts and feelings. So we all have these, thoughts and feelings, but so many of us are fused to them and mistake them, this great case of mistaken identity, to be ourselves. And we're, really important aspect of meditation is understanding that we are not our thoughts and feelings, and sensing this greater awareness that we really are, and that we witness our thoughts, feelings, actions, and behaviors, but we are not bound to them. We can observe them and understand that they aren't who we are. And I tell this story to a lot of my clients about the Ship of Fools. This was a Plato allegory where he talks about a case where there's a ship. So imagine a ship with a lot of sailors, and they've locked the captain in the hold. And now they're having a party on the deck, and they're taking the boat this way and that. and they're drunken, but nobody can decide where to go because there's no captain. So they're just basically, the boat isn't getting anywhere. And the job of meditation is really to free the captain from the hold, quell the mutiny that's happening in our minds. So this is really an analogy of our minds. And there's this mutiny going on, I think, for many of us with our thoughts. And what we need to do is we need to resurrect the captain. We need to bring our true selves, whatever you want to call it, source, true self. For some people, it's a spiritual, higher consciousness, whatever that is for you. That's who you really are. And you need to understand that you're the person, and that is who we really are. And put our thoughts, our sailors, and feelings into perspective, and detach from them in order to be mentally sound. I think it's just so, so key. And meditation is a huge part of really being able to separate and resurrect the captain or our true self and see our thoughts, witness them, and not react to them. And there's another fundamental piece, which is it's allowing what is present now and really being able to come into the present moment and feel this awareness that we really are, or captain, if that works for you, and allow what is happening around us and in a non-reactive way without feeling compelled to judge and label everything that's coming in and out of our world, because that's fundamentally that is all part of reacting to this illusion of these thoughts that are actually quite illusory, and they aren't actually real. They aren't who you really are. And so we let that go and we come back to what is fundamentally here now, and the ground of our being, our awareness. I was going to do an activity, but I'm a little aware of time. Shane, can you give me a time check? And
yeah, it'd probably be better if we could just keep going, and then I can put these in as recommended exercises and notes for people to try afterwards.
Perfect. Great. And then the fourth one is really guarding your mental inputs. I'm really big on this. I used to just kind of take in, I would sort of randomly read the New York Times every day and just take in this news. And I chose what I wanted, but I don't believe I chose carefully enough. And I really believe that we should be the gatekeepers of our minds, and we decide what comes in, and we should be much more discriminating and feel that it's okay to be much more discriminating about what we take in. And that we shouldn't feel like we have a duty to read a certain amount of news about a certain amount of things. And I actually haven't read the news for more than a year. And it doesn't mean I don't read lots of things. I'm actually a voracious reader of all kinds of things, constantly reading about science and all these coaching and all these things I'm working with that are relevant to what I'm passionate about. But I don't feel like I owe it to anybody anymore to stay on top of the news just because, for me, the mental check on that was, well, before we had the internet, before we had all this 100 years ago, was it, people would just know what was happening in their community, and that was okay and enough. So why isn't that okay and enough now? So I just really feel that it's very important to decide what's important to you, decide what you're passionate about and what you can affect, and where you want to make change in the world, and feel perfectly fine with that being, what you let in. And that it's really fundamental to our happiness to filter and guard our mental being, because it's it affects us so dramatically. So just being conscious about it. And then these other ones, I won't go into detail, but I will just sort of touch on them and say, you know, certainly to me, what you eat matters. And I think, you know, there's lots of different diets and nutrition advice out there. And to me, it's really about being mindful about your own body and learning your own body and what your own body works for you. So, and that's when we start to be mindful through meditation and notice, then we can start to notice, oh, when I eat wheat, it doesn't feel good to my system. That's more important than, you know, than reading a book and doing somebody's, you know, somebody's set diet. And then that said, I think there's some sound principles of, you know, healthy, organic, fresh fruits and vegetables that probably are the ground of most, should be the ground of most people's diets, but with a healthy dose of what works for you and learning that. Similarly with movement and light, I think those are really key, important things. I personally have found for myself that going for a trail run every morning, almost every morning, really helps my system detox. And so that's what I do because it feels great and I love it. But that, to me, the guiding principle should be what feels good to you and do you love? Because that's what you're able to sustain, and just knowing your body and knowing yourself. Light can be huge. I think, you know, we don't give sunlight enough credibility or an understanding. And, you know, for me, when I learned that, you know, oh, sunglasses, I mean, getting light in our eyes regulates sleep, for example. And I started to pay more attention to making sure that I didn't wear sunglasses at least 20 or 30 minutes a day. So I got some light in my eyes. So learning about light and paying attention to that, I think, is key. Certainly having good sleep habits and paying attention to things like dark room and blue light before you go to bed, and coolness and all those things that you can find lots of resources on, I think are really key. And I've recently gotten really into dream yoga, and I think that, you know, the reason I put it there is that I really believe that we kind of dismiss the dream world in Western society, and there is a, you know, very long tradition in Tibetan practice and other cultures in the world of honoring our dreams as being able to be truth tellers to our consciousness and then light up what is actually happening in our consciousness. And so I would be remiss to say that I didn't think it was important, because I really do. I think starting to pay attention to the other 8 hours in our lives and what our minds are doing there is key. And I'm going to close with this. You know, I'm a big fan of heroes, and, you know, Frodo and this story touched my heart dramatically. And the reason I put this particular quote here is because I feel like when we look to our heroes and our hero stories like Frodo and the Ring, or like Star Wars, or the many others, our heroes they don't walk in fear. They face tremendous challenges like Frodo did. Or, you know, when I think to the Star Wars myth and, you know, what they were up against, and they weren't cowering in the corner of saying, you know, afraid and feeling fearful that they weren't going to win. Instead, they embodied confidence that whatever it took, they would have that. And I really feel that a key to stepping into the flow life is to not carrying the fear that it's so easy to go down about, you know, we're living in a difficult time, there's no question, but when we look to our heroes were not afraid. Our heroes face great challenges without fear. And so I think embodying those ethics, those qualities of confidence and courage, and being willing to be true to ourselves and find that truth is as important as anything. This is just my favorite one of all, right? I wish it need not happen in my time, said Frodo. So I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. And, you know, coming full circle. Nobody can do this for you. Nobody can change your mind. Nobody can, you know, at the end of the day, you choose what to put on your plate or, you know, how to exercise. You fundamentally decide what to let into your own mind. And, you know, that how we choose to do that is going to shape essentially, you know, that's what we have. It's within our sphere of influence. And I just really feel like taking those principles to heart and incorporating all these other things I've talked about. That's how we as in our best selves can respond to, that gives us the strength and the power to respond to the world that we see around us that, you know, if it can feel troubled and unbearable and overwhelming. Yeah, anyway, that's my story. And I'm a coach and also involved in some new ventures, but I love working with people who want some help changing their mind, changing their inner architecture, stepping into the flow of life. It's become my passion. And so, yeah, if you're interested in the work that I do, I welcome you to reach out to me on my website or through email. So, thank you.